Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a moment to talk to you a little bit about growth and this idea of making an initiative to get out of the situation you're in and put yourself in a better situation. When I moved to New York on Labor Day weekend of 2003, I moved from a small town in Maine. It's an island off the coast of Maine. And the summer before I moved, I was working at a restaurant there. It was the only restaurant in town. It doesn't even exist anymore. They ripped it down and replaced it with an apartment building. But I remember there was this girl that worked there. She was a barkeep. For a couple days out of the week, she would tend bar. And she was the daughter of a well-to-do family. They were a summer family, I think from Massachusetts, and they were pretty well off. And she ended up marrying the son of another well-to-do family. They were basically the bourgeoisie of New England, part of the bourgeoisie. And so they never ever saw struggle in their life. Whatever they needed to do, whatever they wanted to do, they somehow had the resources to do it. And I remember her laughing when she was told, I told her I was moving to New York City and that my goal was to move by September of that year. And she laughed and she goes, "Oh, what are you going to do? Go to New York to make it big?" And I said, "Listen, Sarah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that I can't be here anymore," or something like that. And it kind of always bothered me because that same year was the year that I had made a film. Well, I had made a film the previous year, but when I make a film, they typically exist for a couple of years before it becomes a film I made. So in late 2001, I will start pre-production on a film, and it'll take a few years for it to be finished and to be screened and for it to kind of end up in an archive. And so even though I had made the film the previous year, it was still relatively new. And I gave it to her, and her boyfriend watched it at one point, and they came back and they were very humored by it, even though it wasn't supposed to be funny. It was one of those attempts to make a serious movie, and it basically only ended up being relatively funny because of the attempt to be serious. And they laughed at me about it, and they laughed at the movie, and I'm like, well, I didn't know what to think of it. I just okay, whatever. There were other people who were more polite about it, and they understood what I was trying to do, and they respected what I was trying to do, but they laughed at the fact that I was moving to New York to try and do something with my life. They laughed at the fact that I was trying to make art and using a medium that wasn't being used at the time in that particular place. I was the only filmmaker in town who was out to make movies, essentially. And I've been thinking about it recently because it's 2020, and I'm only a few years out from, well, it's 2021 actually. The pandemic screwed up my mental timeline. It's 2021, which means I'm nearing the point where the 20th anniversary of that movie, of when I made that movie, but I'm also nearing the 20th anniversary of when I moved to New York. In a couple of years, it'll be the 20th anniversary of when I moved to New York. And, it's really easy to laugh at somebody who wants to do great, big things. But I don't understand why they would. Nobody came out of the woodwork, for example, to mentor me about how to make a movie that wouldn't be laughed at. I did what I could with what I had. I didn't even own my own camera. I had to borrow the camera from a high school student to make this movie. All of my people involved, for the most part, were younger than me. They were still in high school, and in some cases middle school, because nobody my age thought it was cool to be engaging in a community film project like this. They thought driving around this island town, wasting gas, going in circles and drinking beer was the coolest thing ever. I never thought it was that cool. I thought making a movie in this place where nobody had made a movie was really cool. And so all the participants, for the most part, were much younger than me because they were the only ones who saw it as kind of being cool and being new, and making this very uninteresting, boring place we were living in, it finally made it interesting. It finally gave them a mechanism to explore it and look at it through a different quote-unquote lens, no pun intended. And so, but then there's the whole moving to New York thing. Is part of that was acknowledging, one, I was living in a place with very limited economic opportunity. And in order for me to claw my way out of the poverty I was born in, I had to move to a place with other opportunities. It wasn't, coming to New York City wasn't necessarily about making it big. All it was about having opportunity, having a way to live my life so that I wasn't subjugated to either restaurant work, carpentry, or fishing. Those were basically the options. And now you don't even get to work in a restaurant there because they fucking closed it. So my advice to people who are stuck in a place and they want to rise up and leave and do something better, if you're not surrounded by people who are supportive of you doing that, fuck them. They don't have your best interests at heart. All they have is their preconceived idea of what the world is, what the world should be, and what everybody's place in it, especially if they come from wealth. Like, you can't trust somebody who's never struggled to understand why it is you need to get out of Dodge. Never. And by the way, they still live there. Those two people I'm talking about who laughed at me for wanting to move to New York, who laughed at my film, they're still there. And they've never struggled a day in their life. They've never had hardship. They've never, when I moved to New York, I hopped around from apartment to apartment because I found it so difficult to be able to make rent, to be able to live with people who didn't understand that I needed space to create, that I needed to be able to just do what I needed time to do what I do. I don't just go to work and party. Like, I don't work for the weekends. And there's a lot of people who don't respect that, who don't understand that. And honestly, the first bit of peace that I ever found as a creative living in New York was a few years in. It took me a few years, but I ended up renting basically what was a janitor's closet in an apartment building. The super rented me his janitor's closet and just kept all of his supplies in his own apartment. And I even had the thing wired for internet. But this janitor's closet, which I'm pretty sure was an illegal space, that was the most peaceful moment of my adulthood that I'd had up until that point. I completed some of my first real serious works of literature there, my first real serious screenplays that I could actually focus on, be like, okay, here's what I've been doing wrong. I finally had the clarity in that space to grow as a creative, to grow as a writer, to grow as a storyteller, because I didn't have to worry about roommates who didn't understand what I needed in terms of just peace and quiet and space. And I didn't have to deal with neighbors who lived in the same town laughing at me for trying. I was alone with my creativity, working in a city that allowed me the anonymity necessary to be who I needed to be. And I don't know why I still think about this couple and why they laughed at me, why it still bothers me after all these years. Well, at least I didn't until now. And I'm walking in the woods. I'm actually in New York City. It doesn't look like I'm in New York City, but look at this. New York City has a lot of natural woodland that you can just like walk in, and there's deer that live in here. It's crazy. But I'm walking in the woods here in New York City, and I'm thinking about them, and I'm getting angry again. And I'm like, why are they making me so angry? And I realize it's because it's happening to other people too. This is why people don't leave their hometowns. People like that are why they don't try to rise above their station, These naysayers, these fucking assholes who've never struggled a day in their life think that they know what's best for you. And if you are stuck in a place and you know that you're missing something, that you have the opportunity, that you would have the opportunity to rise if you could just get out. Ignore the naysayers and just get the hell out. Get out of your hometown. You don't necessarily have to go to a big city, but just try it someplace else. Do a little bit of research and get out. Because you're the only one who knows what's best for you. That's it.